Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown.
I don't remember.
Okay, it's a quiet week for once. Yay? I mean, I guess folks weren't hunting for the Lil Skies album bomb, so things look pretty reserved in the Hot 100 for a change. And while I'm definitely not complaining, it builds off of what I was saying last week about not seeking normalization of any of this, especially when I've got no clear idea what's going to disrupt or change things in the near future. But that also means we could be with the top 10 that we're stuck with for a little while, especially as Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo is not going anywhere at number 1, effectively dominant in sales and streaming and receiving all the radio traction all of a sudden. I will say I'm a little bit surprised that Mood by 24kGoldn featuring Ian Dior recovered up to number 2, given that it's actively being rotated out on the radio despite having some really solid streaming, or that The Weeknd by Blinding Lights, Blinding Lights by The Weeknd went up to number 3 despite losing everywhere else. But that's also more because 34 plus 35 by Ariana Grande with the remix with Doja Cat and Megan Thee Stallion is ebbing back naturally, as radio is on the rise and streaming is solid, but nobody's really buying the song, so it's down at number 4. Been the story of Ariana Grande's album cycle here. Then we got the expected boost for Levitating by Dua Lipa featuring DaBaby breaking in at number 5, which is kind of odd because its radio has slowed down a lot and sales and streaming probably need a little bit of a boost to push it any higher, but it did go up, as did Go Crazy by Chris Brown and Young Thug up to number 6 despite the radio freefall, mostly because Positions by Ariana Grande slipped down to number 7, mostly because all it really has now is radio and it's getting rotated out as well. Then there was Holy by Justin Bieber featuring Chance the Rapper at number 8, which the radio is also getting rid of, just a lot more slowly, more's the pity, and that will hopefully open up the door for Good Days by SZA up to number 9, which is still dominant on streaming, but nobody's putting it on the radio. Come on here, it's a great song! And finally, there's Bang by AJR at number 10. Yeah, the sales are still decent, but given its radio collapse, might not last much longer. Just saying. But on that note, our losers and dropouts. And while there are 3 considerable ones in the latter category, Love You Like I Used To by Russell Dickerson, I Should Probably Go to Bed by Dan and Shay, and WAP by Cardi B featuring Megan Thee Stallion, the week still did feel kind of quiet. Off the debuts last week, we saw Bad Boy by Late Juice WRLD and Young Thug implode at 57, and Masterpiece by DaBaby just tank at 92. So much for the damage control. And from there, it looks like a lot of would-be hits are just not really sticking the landing. Champagne Night by Lady A lost everything down to 93. Still Trappin' by Lil Durk and the late King Von slid down to 84. Big Big Plans by Chris Lane really underperformed at 82. And Holiday by Lil Nas X slid down to 71. Really hope that last one would have had a little bit more staying power, but when it's got that title, I mean, what did you expect? Now, we also did have a fair number of gains and returning entries, which might help define what 2021 will look like for the next little while. The problem is that a lot of them really suck. In the latter category, I'm kind of surprised to see that You Got It by Vito is back at 95, and Casey Talk by Youngboy Never Broke Again is back at 98. But was it really worth bringing back Heat Waves by Glass Animals to 91 along the way? And then in a lot of our gains, it's really just a mix of country and trap. Yeah, Bishota by Karol G, it's back at 75, and Golden by Harry Styles is continuing up to 65, but beyond that, well, let's handle the new arrivals from last week first. The Goosebumps remix from Travis Scott and Hume is up to 73, and Beatbox by Spot'em Got'em's at 60. You can shoot me anytime now. But then you got our continued gains, the songs with traction. Bust It by Erica Banks at 67. Throat Baby Go Baby by BRS Cash, likely riding off that ridiculous remix, and the video with DaBaby and City Girls, plus the album boost to 24. Streets by Doja Cat is continuing to catch a lot of traction at 25. And then we got a trio of questionable country, with Beers and Sunshine by Darius Rucker at 53, Down to One by Luke Bryan at 58, and Just the Way Away by Parmalee and Blanco Brown at 56. But the bad country doesn't stop there, because The Good Ones by Gabby Barrett's at 64, and Long Live by Florida Georgia Line is at 68. And you know, Nashville, we really don't have to follow a really damn good year for this genre on the charts with a shitty one. You know that, right? But here's the thing. We actually only have 4 new songs this week, which means that I would normally go for a world hit or an ideal hit. But truth being told, I'm not hearing a lot going on right now in music, at least around the mainstream, that's grabbed a lot of my attention as an immediate standout smash that I would like to review. I did, however, hear something that's considerably messier that did wind up requested on my song review series for Instagram, at Spectrum Pulse, Beat the Rush. So why don't I kill 2 birds with 1 stone, talk about what I'm gonna call a non-hit.
I still burn for you, like the sun burns in the sky. I still burn for you.
Okay, you're gonna have to follow with me on this one. You all should know Avril Lavigne, pop punk, pop rock artist of the early 2000s. Kind of had her career stumble when she went full pop around 2006, 2007. It's a frustrating and sad but all too relatable story, but you might not recognize Maud's son, whose name is reportedly an acronym for Movement on Dreams, Stand Under None. If you think that's disgusting, he also dated Tana Mojo last year for a couple of months, but we are here to talk about his music, which in the 2010s he had a brief run on an indie label that got him collabs with the Riff Raff, the Ready Set, and a slew of TDE rappers who should really know better. Seriously, he's worked with Schoolboy Q and Ab-Soul. He also knew Machine Gun Kelly from way back in that day, so now that MGK is seeing the most success he's ever had, Maud's son has followed in his wake with an image rebrand and a couple collabs, and now Avril Lavigne is here. All this is considerably more interesting than the song that we actually got, which is about a not over it relationship moment, and has me really wondering why anyone thought this would work beyond just the name recognition alone. One thing to note here is that Avril Lavigne is in her mid-30s, and she's firmly settling into an adult contemporary sound that has her very much in piano ballad mold. Really, that's been indicative on her last few projects, whereas Maud's son wants to make a pop-punk rager and show precisely zero chemistry with her, damn near overpowering her voice on the hook, which means that the song has to keep on slamming the brakes for the hook even as the desaturated guitars play off a lot of the sharper percussion, and nothing holds close to a consistent mood or any sense of crescendo, even before the bassy trap flip to end out the song that fits with nothing. To keep this short, yeah, it's a mess, and right now I'm grateful it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, even though it could have been a hit with the right marketing. Avril Lavigne, she deserves better than this. Maud's son probably does not. But alright, on to our list proper. Number 100, Antes by Anuel AA and Ozuna. Oh look, 2 of my least favorite artists in reggaeton teamed up for a full-length album just a couple weeks ago, and we got a single from it on the charts. And is that stock reggaeton percussion matching desaturated melodic flourishes, at least until the synth horns slip in to punch up some kicks on Anuel AA's verse? I think it is. Where he then can't sell any sense of gravitas or impact because he remains one of the most anonymous figures in this scene. Now, Ozuna is not anonymous, more's the pity, again, and he doesn't really complement the more aggressive vibe of this song with his more nasal tones. But then you get to the actual narrative when you translate the lyrics, which just feels confused, wistful and nostalgic for past times, but then there's all the gangsta posturing and then more dancing at this club, and we don't get a clear indication whether or not the girl in the song is new or coming back from their past. But either way, like most reggaeton from these two, it's just painfully generic, so pass. Number 97, Opp Stoppa by YBN Nahmir featuring 21 Savage.
You in love with drama. Say baby, I'm not salsa baby, but I keep a llama. Got a pull up in a new I8, you riding in a Honda.
I'll be honest, after Corday proved he was probably the most interesting from the YBN crew, I just stopped caring about them, especially as Rubbing Off the Paint didn't really stick with me either. But now he somehow pulled together another hit, this time with 21 Savage, who really is the bigger name, and wow, I suddenly remember why I wasn't a big fan of YBN Nahmir. It's mostly his delivery. He's trying to mimic 21 Savage's dead-eyed conversational style, but 21 normally has enough menace to make that work against the right production, which this certainly isn't because of the overweight bass and the jerky piano loop, and YBN Nahmir just sounds stilted and awkward, and all the ad-libs he piles onto his verse and hook just obscure any power he could really have. It doesn't help that the content is just nothing to write home about. A lot of killing people, stealing your girlfriend, doing drugs, and to quote YBN Nahmir's opening line, he's got a rocket in his pocket. Yeah, that's the level we're on with this. It feels disposable, like YBN Nahmir calling in a favor for a quick hit, and it won't last. Next, number 62, Vas A Olvidar by Billie Eilish and ROSALIA.
Can you let it go?
This kind of unexpected until you give it a few minutes thought and it makes all the sense in the world. Seems like a critic's dream to pair Billie Eilish with ROSALIA, especially for a slinky slow burn apparently that's been in the works since 2019, where the song is mostly in Spanish, which did give me pause. I wasn't sure how good Billie Eilish would sound in that language, but considering Phineas was producing, I had expectations for it, even if it might just be tied into Euphoria's soundtrack. And it's interesting, because I would argue it's half of what I expected, but also feels so spare that you would wonder what the other half would even be. Yeah, Billie Eilish and ROSALIA have really good chemistry, even with the obvious touches of auto-tune around them, and Billie Eilish sounds very good singing in Spanish, and I like the tension in the content that almost feels biblical in all the negative space here, playing exes where one would love to downplay the significance for her own sanity's sake, and the other now craves the memory. It's a really potent moment, and I like how the framing doesn't judge either of them, but it doesn't feel like much of a song beyond that. Mostly because the production is so spare and minimal, there's just not much of a tune to anchor anything. It's a really great exercise in atmosphere and chemistry, but I don't know, maybe a little bit more in the arrangement would have put this over the top. As it is, still very good, but I really wanted to love this one, and not quite there yet. Just saying. And finally, number 48, Skin by Sabrina Carpenter. And now, we're here. For those of you who don't know, I've reviewed multiple Sabrina Carpenter projects, so I'm very well familiar with her generally derivative and underwhelming pop music. And apparently that's been sacrilegious to point out to her bewilderingly large number of fans who don't want to acknowledge just how much she's been ripping off Ariana Grande and Camila Cabello for years now for what feels like vanity projects that don't have the depth or originality to support all of her swagger. Now, you know what, to her credit, she finally got off of Hollywood Records and away from their mediocre stable of producers, only to wind up as the other girl in Olivia Rodrigo's Driver's License. Two thoughts here. Number one, this is really starting to feel like a coordinated campaign to get both of their careers kickstarted, as well as the guy in question, given that they are both Universal acts under different subsidiaries. And two, there was never a need for a response song, because the appeal of Driver's License is internal to Olivia Rodrigo above anything else. Sabrina Carpenter is incidental detail in that song, but you want to know the best way to convince someone that it's really not about you with her ex? You know, make a response song, that's the ticket. Now, look, I'm not against the back and forth in principle. I'm even willing to give Sabrina Carpenter another chance given my history with her here, but man, she needed a different song other than Skin here to sell it. First off, it's not nearly as developed or detailed or has anything close to the compositional complexity that Driver's License had, but also it doesn't really need to. It just needs to be a response that might humanize her, but instead she went for more of the I'm telling my side of the story, he's underneath me now, I've always been in the spotlight, I just have to handle it, and the only way any of this gets under my skin is if I let it happen. Well, first off, bullshit. You wrote the song, you were very clearly bothered, and secondly, you can't play magnanimous if half the song is gloating here, which feels undercooked, just like when when it was on the last two albums. There's a hint of a decent point in that she wasn't asking for Olivia Rodrigo's fans to go harass her on social media, which is what over-dedicated stans will do. You should stop that. But this only eggs on the conflict, and it's not like your side of the story here is more than just another self-congratulatory ego trip. And more frustratingly, how is the production still this mediocre? That's the one element that makes me think this isn't coordinated at all, because her vocals either sound flat or over-compressed, the mix is just a lot of spare synth and piano warps, and it tries to evoke bombast with so little melody that there's no real core to it, and she's still a very breathy singer that this production crib from Camila Cabello does not flatter. It feels like a pop cut from the mid-2010s, and not a memorable one. In other words, even if I might have history with Sabrina Carpenter that I'm not sure any other pop critic has, it's just not anything close to good. I'll say it. And yeah, it's comfortably the worst of this week. Best of the week is going to Billie Eilish and ROSALIA for Vas A Olvidar. See what happens when you actually have production and stylism that can flatter some breathy vocals and presentation. But next week, see, I have no idea. Given that I don't have expectations for a Weezer crossover single, it might wind up quiet again. We'll have to see. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse.